We want to take you now to the White House, where President Biden is delivering remarks on the COVID-19 response. Let's listen in.
Capacity of American companies and the whole of government response across federal, state, tribal, and local governments. Together, we built an unparalleled vaccination program and managed one of the biggest and most complicated logistical challenges in American history. And above all, we got here because of the American people stepping up and getting vaccinated, helping family, friends, neighbors get vaccinated. And just remember what the situation was like 150 days ago. We didn't have enough vaccine supply for all Americans. We didn't have the vaccine infrastructure or the people to administer the vaccines or the places where the people could get vaccinated. But we turned it around together by acting quickly and aggressively and equitably. We secured enough vaccine supply for every American. And as I announced last week during my visit to Europe, we are now in a position to provide more than 1/2 billion vaccine doses to the rest of the world, the 100 poorest nations. We developed and deployed over 9,000 federal personnel, including 5,100 active duty military to support the vaccine effort and to get shots into arms. And now we have more than 81,000 vaccination sites across the country, including over 42,000 local pharmacies. Thanks to this wartime response, we've gotten 300 million shots in the arms of Americans in 150 days, months ahead of what most anyone thought was possible when we started. In fact, if you remember, a lot of people were skeptical that we could even get 100 million shots in my first 100 days into people's arms. But we did it. We kept going. And what we're seeing is a truly American accomplishment. 65% of American adults have gotten at least one shot, including 87% of our seniors. Just 5 months ago, we were at only 5% of adult Americans. 15 states in the District of Columbia have now reached at least 70% vaccination rate in their state. 26 states and D.C. have fully vaccinated, 50% or more of the adults. Nationwide, we have the lowest number of daily deaths since the first days of the pandemic. And we've built equity into the heart of our vaccination program from day one. 73% of the shots administered at community health centers through the federal program, and more than 58% of the shots administered by federally run vaccination sites have gone to people of color. And across the nation, people of color have accounted for more than half of all vaccinations in the last month. That's important progress. We have much more to do. Vice President Harris, as I speak, is in Atlanta, getting the word out about the vaccinations. Yesterday, I signed a bill, into law, making Juneteenth a federal holiday. And this weekend, folks in communities across the country are going to be canvassing and hosting events to encourage their families, friends, and neighbors to get vaccinated. The more we close the racial gap in vaccination rates, the more lives we'll save. And as our vaccination program is saving tens of thousands of lives. With that count growing each day, it's also allowing millions of Americans to get back to living their lives. Grandparents hugging their kids, kids back to school and getting ready for the summer, people going out to restaurants and traveling, businesses are reopening. Folks, we're heading into a very different summer compared to last year. A bright summer, prayerfully a summer of joy. But as I promised you from the beginning, I will always give it to you straight. The good, the bad, and the truth. And the truth is that deaths and hospitalizations are drastically down in places where people are getting vaccinated. But unfortunately, cases and hospitalizations are not going down in many places in the lower vaccination rate states. They're actually going up in some places. A few days ago, we crossed 600,000. 600,000 Americans dead from COVID. More than every death in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and 9/11 combined. So even while we're making incredible progress, it remains a serious and deadly threat. And the data is clear. If you are unvaccinated, you're at risk of getting seriously ill or dying or spreading it. People getting seriously ill and being hospitalized due to COVID-19 are those who have not been fully vaccinated. The new variant will leave unvaccinated people even more vulnerable than they are a month ago. This is a serious concern, especially because of what experts are calling the Delta variant. It's a variant that is more easily transmissible, potentially deadlier, and particularly dangerous for young people. But the good news is we have the solution. The science and the data are clear. The best way to protect yourself against these variants are to get fully vaccinated. So please, please, if you have one shot, get the second shot as soon as you can so you're fully vaccinated. If you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, get vaccinated now. Don't put it off. It's free, it's easy, it's convenient. And as I said many times, text your zip code to the numbers 438829. 438829 to find the sites where you can get vaccinated closest to you. Get your free Uber or Lyft ride to and from vaccination sites. I want to thank Uber and Lyft for their cooperation. Use the extended hours at thousands of pharmacies in June, including thousands that are open 24/7 on Friday this month. Most pharmacies now offer walk-in vaccinations. No appointments needed. Employers with less than 500 employees, the federal government is providing you a tax credit to give your workers paid time off to get vaccinated and recover if they need be. And for anyone who still questions, that's okay. You still have questions. But act. Act now. Act now. Talk to your family and friends who've gotten vaccinated. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist. According to the American Medical Association, over 90% of physicians are fully vaccinated. They're making the choice to protect themselves and their communities and their patients. Follow their lead and make the choice for yourself. As I said, we're heading into, God willing, the summer of joy, a summer of freedom. On July 4, we're going to celebrate our independence from the virus as we celebrate our independence of our nation. We want everyone to be able to do that. Let's remember, we are the United States of America. Let's get this done, all of us together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Mr. President, do you have any comment about the Catholic bishops?
Could the Delta variant force us back into lockdown?
I don't think so, because so many people have already been vaccinated. But with the Delta variant can cause more people to die in areas where people have not been vaccinated. Where people have gotten the 2 shots, the Delta variant is highly unlikely to result in anything other than, the existing vaccines are very effective. So, no, it's not a lockdown, but some areas will be very hurt.
Any comment about
what the Catholic bishops have done? Are you concerned about this rift within the Catholic Church, and are you concerned about this action?
Say again?
The Catholic bishops are moving on this resolution that would prevent you and others who've supported abortion from receiving communion. Are you concerned about the rift in the Catholic Church, and how do you feel personally about that?
That's a private matter, and I don't think that's going to happen. Thank you.
Mr. President, so on Ukraine, the bipartisan plan, do you have any reaction to that?
We've been watching President Biden speak about the U.S. vaccination effort. He says 81,000 vaccination sites across the U.S. have helped deliver 300 million shots into the arms of Americans, and that 65% of American adults have now received at least one shot. But he did warn that unvaccinated Americans who live in areas where vaccination rates are low the Delta variant could emerge as a real threat. CBS News' Natalie Brand is at the White House and joins us now. Hi, Natalie. So the 300 million doses certainly is a major achievement. But of course, the administration is still working towards its goal of getting at least one COVID-19 shot into 70% of American adults by July 4th. What is it doing to achieve that goal?
That's right. And that target date is just about 2.5 weeks away now. And that's why we are hearing these remarks from the president, this final vaccine push, and also seeing the vice president on the road traveling this week to some southern states where the vaccination rates have been lagging. Because the reality, Tanya, is that according to the White House, just 15 states plus D.C. have reached that target of 70% of U.S. adults with at least one shot of the COVID vaccine. And we also heard from the president there's a lot of concern about Americans who are not fully vaccinated, who have not yet received their second shot, because we have this fast-spreading Delta variant, the variant that first was discovered in India, now in around 42 states here in the U.S.
That's right. And so how concerned is the White House with the Delta variant of COVID-19? I mean, experts do say that it is, the percentage of cases in the U.S. that you can attribute to the Delta variant continue to grow rather quickly. Has the White House said more about how worried they are about this variant?
Well, we heard the president in his remarks just now spend quite a bit of time talking about that warning about the Delta variant. And health experts have also pointed to a recent study that showed that one dose of the Pfizer vaccine was only about 33% effective against the Delta variant, compared to 88% protection if you had the second dose. So that is really a good reason, a powerful message to send to people who have not yet been fully vaccinated. And as far as what the administration is trying to do to encourage those who may still be vaccine hesitant, we're seeing almost a political campaign in terms of canvassing, door knocking, phone banking in certain communities, really trying to engage the grassroots and also the business community. That's a message that we've heard time and time again from administration officials and also seen in the communities. The goal now is really to try to meet people where they are, get information about the vaccine into places where people frequent, whether that's the hair salon or the barber shop. That's been a push during this month of action by the White House. And we heard the vice president, who traveled to Georgia on Friday, say that it's really now about spreading the word, friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor, and among powerful community leaders and family physicians who are really powerful messengers. And I can tell you, Tanya, we have seen when we go out to, say, rural communities and there's a pop-up vaccination site where health officials have reached out to places that might be harder to reach. People might just stop by. People who didn't plan to make an appointment might be more encouraged or inclined to drop in and finally get that vaccine in some of these communities that are still lagging.
So that outreach effort is really helping, making it so convenient for people that are in sort of areas where it might be harder to get to one of those sites. So, Natalie, I want to pivot now and ask you about voting rights legislation. The vice president's trip to Georgia today also included a conversation on voting rights. As we know, the Senate will vote next week on the For the People Act. The massive election reform bill is expected to fail, but West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin is laying out a compromise proposal that does have the backing of Stacey Abrams. Where does the president stand on this battle over voting rights reform?
Well, Tanya, because it's been such a busy week, we have not been able to ask the president or the press secretary Friday or Thursday about this hot button issue here in the U.S. of voting rights. But we know that Vice President Harris is having a listening session today in Atlanta. And we also know that we're going to hear a lot more about this next week because, as you noted, there is a procedural vote scheduled for Tuesday on that voting rights legislation. And then with this compromise proposal by Senator Manchin, now backed by Stacey Abrams, the question becomes, is the Democratic caucus working out a compromise to try to get unity, everyone on board on the Democratic side? Of course, with a 50-50 split and the filibuster intact, you do not have that moving forward, but it is definitely going to be a procedural vote that puts senators on the record, and we'll really have to see what comes of that next week. But I can also say that we've heard this week and obviously in past weeks a lot of messaging from the president, from the vice president during various speeches talking about the significance of voting rights legislation to the administration, and that being a top priority. We are also hearing that notably from Attorney General Garland and the DOJ making clear that civil rights enforcement within their purview and where they can crack down on any issues that might be arising in states, they are trying to redouble their efforts to look into that and really beef up staffing at the federal level to make sure that federal voting rights are enforced even as gridlock remains in Congress.
Natalie Brand at the White House, thank you.